Food is love. Something I learned from my Italian grandmother, and that cultural heritage may play into this story as well. Please welcome to Field Notes, Kyle Zegel.
I spent last Mother's Day with my dad. You see, my mom and my dad live about a half hour away from each other on the North Shore of Massachusetts, north of Boston. So when I go to visit my mom, I always make a point to go visit my dad as well. That weekend, Mom got Saturday and Dad got Sunday. So I meet my dad at his favorite diner in North Andover, but like I said, it's Mother's Day, so there's a very long line. But my dad and I know there's no other option. There's no way out of this. We came to eat. So we wait in line. And as we're waiting, we get to talking. We get to talking about food, as is the normal focal point of our conversation. And so by the time we get seated, we're ravenous. I order a classic Eggs Benedict. My dad orders a smoked salmon Benedict because he's from Long Island, the land of bagels and lox. Interesting, we got like one Long Island person out there. And so we're sitting and eating. My dad's peppering me with questions about my life. Everything from my job to my new roommate. I tell him, my job, it's tough, but I love it. My roommate's great, but his cat who screams at me every time I walk in the door is even better. And at that point, I start to realize my dad might not be paying full attention to me. Kyle, you gotta try this. He says as he shoves a forkful of salmon Benedict right up to my face. You see, for my dad, the world revolves around food. And I'm the youngest of three, very eager to please, so I oblige. 45 minutes later, I'm relaxing on his chiropractic table after getting an adjustment at his office, after getting my neck adjusted without any accidental paralysis, something I've trusted him to do for many years. And as I'm lying there relaxing, I start to hear some rummaging around in the dark back closet of his office. Unsure of what he's up to, he comes out, Kyle, you gotta try this, with a large hunk of smoked mozzarella in one hand and a log of red wine-soaked sopressata salami in the other, a very dead giveaway of his Sicilian heritage. And I mean, what diabetic, bipolar Italian man doesn't have a chunk of cheese and a log of meat in his office mini fridge in the dark back closet? Despite being very full from breakfast, I oblige. 45 minutes later, I'm installing AC units in his apartment. You see, he's an older man, he struggles to lift things, he has 2 artificial hips, chronic heart disease, and enough metal in his chest to make a full set of silverware. And so I'm finishing installing an AC unit in his bedroom. And I start to hear some rummaging around in the kitchen, and I have an inkling of what he's up to, but before I can even get to the kitchen, I hear, Kyle, you gotta try this. And when I walk in, my dad is hovering over a massive pot, and knowing him, that means last night he made pasta asciutto, a huge pot of tomato sauce with herbs and like 10 different kinds of sausage and meatballs. And let me remind you, at this point, it hasn't even been 2 hours since we had a large breakfast. But, I am just so full and really struggling to imagine eating another bite. But you see, this is a man who, for Christmas, gets his children blueberry jam and pistachios with a side of scratch tickets. This is a man who dogs cannot stop licking his face because, from what I assume, his skin tastes like olive oil and rotisserie chicken. This is a man who, when tasked to get one type of cheese for the holiday platter, brings 5 and a cheesecake. Clearly, food is my dad's primary love language. And I love my dad, so we sit down and we eat pasta asciutto. Before I can leave his apartment, my dad offers me a 12-pack of seltzers, a gallon bucket, yes, a bucket of coleslaw, and the offer to bring me to his favorite supermarket, McKinnon's, so he can buy me a bunch of meat to bring home. I don't really want to go home with my car smelling like a deli as much as I love my dad, so I politely refuse. My dad makes me one final offer. Kyle, you want this stale loaf of bread? I don't really want to start my week with a stale loaf of bread, so again, I politely refuse my dad. But I tell him about this Tuscan dish that I love, panzanella, a wonderful dish where you toast bread and mix it with chopped ripe tomatoes, onions, parsley, capers, and mix it in a dressing of Dijon, good olive oil, and red wine vinegar. It's wonderful. And so I tell my dad, I won't take your stale loaf of bread, but later this summer, when tomatoes are nice and ripe, I'll bring them from the farm and we'll make panzanella. How about that? It's a deal. So, a few months later in August, I find myself gathering the ingredients for panzanella. But on this August evening, I'm not making panzanella for my dad. 2 weeks after I told him about this recipe, my dad passed away. That Mother's Day was the last time that I saw him. So needless to say, that summer was a struggle. I was grieving, and I still am grieving, and I was really struggling to show up for my work. Part of that work for Just Roots in Greenfield is hosting youth and family cooking workshops at local housing complexes and community centers. So that August evening, I chose to teach 4 families how to cook panzanella at the Brick House in Great Falls. Yeah, shout out Brick House. And so I'm really struggling to get going on this day to cook this panzanella, both because I'm making this dish for the first time that I promised to make my dad, but also because I'm racing to Foster's to get all the ingredients. I am stuffing my Hyundai like a cannoli, but with pots and pans and burners. I'm crawling in to try to fix the broken hatchback door that I've neglected to fix all summer. And I leave the farm. Halfway to the brick house, I forgot the tomatoes. So we're working on it. But I finally get to the brick house, and I get everything set up. But like I said, it's a family cooking workshop. So there are screaming children running around, there are exhausted parents chasing them down, but we're making it work. We're learning how to read recipes, we're learning how to chop, proper knife skills, we're learning how to pan toss, that fun trick that the kids are really intimidated to learn, but once they learn it, they're so excited and feel like the true chefs they are. And I'm helping this one kid a lot. I can really feel his enthusiasm. We'll call him Luis. Luis is cooking with his mother. He is chopping up a storm, practicing great knife technique. He is whipping up the dressing. He's becoming a quick expert of the pan toss. And Luis gets the panzanella all finally assembled. And he tries it, and his eyes light up. And Luis looks up to his doting mother, and with a grin full of pride, says, Mamá, tienes que probar esto. You gotta try this.